Everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So really quick before we get into the Death Note reaction, I just want to go ahead and say, I hope you guys have been keeping up with your self-care today as well, or it's either today or tomorrow depending on where you're at. Another video will drop, which is me going into a lot of psychology topics and really diving in deep, which is sort of what I am. I'm a psychologist. For those of you that are new to the channel, hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing something for self-care, keeping up with your own personal happiness. Anyway, some disclaimers beforehand, as I promised. For Death Note, it is a series I watched around 10 years ago, like back when I was still a kid. From then, I got really swept up in my studies and kind of stopped watching certain animes as I kept progressing through my educational progress, right? So I do have some, how do you say, previous knowledge about this show. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm still going to go all the way in deep. We're probably going to stop around when L dies, because I did watch that and then I got really bored afterwards when it's an M and N come in. Yeah, I was just extremely bored after that. So as I said, we're gonna go ahead and watch the series up to there. Don't worry, for the you ReZero fans, ReZero is still coming up, and in fact, there's a lot more planned to come. I am just as excited as all of you are to go ahead and get started with that. But before that, I'm gonna quickly find my pen. It might take me a minute, but for you guys, it'll probably be like that. And I am back, and thank you guys for waiting that 1 second for you guys, that 5 minute hunt for me. I found my pen, I have my handy dandy notebook here, and why don't we go ahead and get started into Death Note, episode 1. Why are the intros always such a bopper? It doesn't matter, right? ReZero's intro is amazing. Death Note, of course, has always been amazing. But yeah, no, it is such a good intro. Sadly, I can't really play it on YouTube, or else I'm gonna get copyright struck or something. But I will say the imagery placed in the opening is worthy of dissection in itself, and I'll probably make another episode just on that. But we're only focusing on the episode itself, so otherwise there'd be spoilers everywhere. Man, I've really forgotten a lot that happened in I only remember the major points, but everything leading up. Oh, and the famous potato chip scene. Can never forget that one, right?
And know that in time you will find your salvation. Yagami, are you still with us?
Alright, let me stop that right there. Right off the bat before we get into some further announcements. Something I'm sure you guys probably noticed, and I noticed now that as this is technically my second look at this series, he's such an observant individual, right? And sort of the way that he was, sort of scanning the classroom, being on top of his stuff. And by the way, feel free, this is all spoilers territory. You guys can spoil anything. Give me your thoughts, your impressions on everything. But beforehand, honestly, he just seems like a smart student. I'll label him as that. He seems really smart. He also seems as though he's just bored, right? But he doesn't seem evil. It doesn't seem in sort of, how do you say it? We'll touch on this a little bit further as we keep going on. I'll stop my thoughts right here and we'll keep going.
Day in and day out. The same news on
Right.
permanent repeat.
This is all so ridiculous.
This world is
Rotten.
Interesting. Right, so there is a sense, right, of, how would you put it? Seeing the world as a rotten world, or as a cursed world, or anything like that, and automatically elevating yourself into someone that either wants to have fun, or in this case, because we know what's going to happen, building yourself up into sort of a narcissistic attitude, right? Or a godlike attitude, which is to come. I already know that it's coming to me as we watch the anime. And I will lay this question down for you, and then I'm going to answer it. Is Light, for you guys, a psychopath or a sociopath? And I will tell you guys what I will diagnose him with, if I had to. But yeah, what do you guys think? Is Light a psychopath or is he a sociopath? Why don't we go ahead and continue?
Becoming extinct at a faster rate than has ever occurred in our recorded history.
This is the event that sets it all off. Everything. Alright. Interesting how he's the only one to notice it, and I do know, you know, as I said, I have further knowledge of what's to come because I've watched the series like 10 years ago. I remember Ryuk telling him that like anybody could have picked up that notebook, and him empowering himself to do this notebook. As I said, spoilers are completely fine, guys. I really want to start a discussion on this anime, essentially. So interesting how he's the one that noticed it, right? And afterwards, after noticing this notebook, he sort of gives himself false entitlement type of thing. I don't know how to put it. Like false sense of entitlement, as though it was chosen for him because he is God, because he will change the world, because everything will go all according to his plan, right? With that being said also, right? Schema. I know I've mentioned this in ReZero, right? Schema is how we look at the world, right? And currently he's like the world is boring, it's filled with like criminals, but like you have to be the perfect role student, like model student and or model citizen and go through with it, right? So that's sort of his schema at the moment. And just keep note of that as we go forward.
Death Note? As in a notebook of death? How to use it. The human whose name is written in this notebook shall die. That's pretty lame. Not to mention twisted.
Yeah,
it's really not that
but
different from one of those chain letters. Coincidence. The human whose name is written in this notebook shall die? Come on.
and I'll stop it right there. Actually, guys, funny story. When I was a kid, those chain letters, especially that you'd get through like random text messaging or like on email or whatever, would scare the crap out of me. Especially because I come from the states, rather well said, from the West Coast. Very into Mexican culture, very into all of that, right? And they sort of breed it into you at a young age. Like there's all this like outside terminology, outside things, forces that might be out to get you and stuff. I remember one night I just couldn't sleep because I was like, oh shit, like I messed up, guys. I opened up the thing and I didn't send it to anybody. Like they're gonna come for me. Had this whole thing. But he's like, overall, right, the thing with those chain letters, and if we're just gonna talk about out of place items, is curiosity, right? So this is another question I'll pose to you guys. If you saw something out of the ordinary, if you picked up something out of the ordinary, right? Are you okay? And I know that this will come with some repercussion, and it's a good point for discussion. Are you liable, right? Are you at fault for the curiosity that it's about to bring, or is the person who left it there? Specifically because it is an intriguing subject, right? So if you saw a death note, you didn't know what it was, you picked it up, right? You left it back down. Would you go ahead and pick it back up, or would you just leave it and completely forget about it? I know for me personally, if I'm going to go ahead and be completely honest, if I saw a death note or something like that, I would pick it up because I'm a curious individual, right? And my curiosity gets the best of me sometimes, and that's when I'm talking about like human curiosity, trying to get down and try and see what a person's core and what they truly are, right? However, we're talking about like using it. That's a separate question, and I'll pose that to you guys as well. Would you guys use the death note if it was available to you? I'll be honest, I might. I'm not gonna lie about it. But then that brings a whole other set of questions. But I just want to lay that down there for you guys. Would you guys use the death note or not? And we'll continue from there. Such an interesting series. Stop right there.
Wait, on the off chance someone really dies, would that make me a murderer?
Cool. And with that being said, it's sort of, as you continue watching through it, as I said, for those of you that are first watching, this is more of an analysis, a deep dive through the psychological lens as to what this series has to offer. So is any reaction to series that you see on here. I'm not going to show the entire episode on here just because I think that's unfair towards the people that make it. If you guys want to support anyone, go ahead and go to Crunchyroll or towards the official makers of the anime and show your support there as well. This is more of an analysis, my thoughts on it as we're going through it. But anyway, as I was saying, kind of proved my point, right? Like, he's still... Curiosity can kill a lot of people, right? They can make you do a lot of stupid stuff. And with that being said, you know, using the notebook, right? Let's talk a little bit about guilt, right? So if you were to kill someone, right? And some, I'm not going to reveal any names, but I have clients of mine, right? That have been veterans, have done certain things out in the field, whatever that may be. Long story short, there's still have some sense of guilt. It's either like guilt or not. Either they've been working through it, working past their trauma, or it's the traumas that have been happening around them, or they have a little bit of a sense of guilt, right? Teaching a life is not easy, from what I've heard or from what I've understood from the stories that have been told to me. Not that, you know, put that out there. But what is the... Do you think guilt would weigh on you? Would it change you? Or do you think the amount of power that that notebook has would change your framework as to how you look at life? Because right now, Light is looking as though he is just a completely normal student. There's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing, you know, there's nothing different about him. He's just a completely normal dude that's sort of intrigued by this notebook. So let's go ahead and continue right away.
This has to be a coincidence.
Bye. It's already 6:30, you know. Don't you have cram school tonight?
Yeah, I'll be ready in just a sec. Death note. It's unlikely, but if by chance this thing is for real, I have to test it one more time. In which case, it should probably be another criminal.
And pause.
But if he's too well known, that'll be a problem.
Boom. And I say boom because this is the key to the entire story, right? Light beforehand was a normal student. This notebook comes into his life, and he might have had this belief system, you know, not really to the extent that it grows, right? But this notebook sort of clicks that changes him, like, oh, I killed one person, no, I have to test it out again. Let's see if it works on other individuals, right? Here's where a lot of people get confused, and I do have to put that pause in there because a lot of people jump into speculations and really don't have an understanding of the DSM or the like diagnostic tool that we use, especially in the United States. So a key difference between a psychopath and a sociopath is a psychopath is born, a sociopath is created. Personally, at this moment, I would go ahead and label Light as a sociopath. I think he was pretty normal-ish, right? Until this moment where he is now given the chance to go ahead and increase his ego, increase his narcissism, display false emotions, and everything that will project itself through this because of the notebook, right? Because he is now a hold of something that gives him more power than he should have, right? So I would label him as a narcissistic sociopath, right? Because he does have this god complex, and you know that's to come. That is to come, and I am spoilers for those of you ahead. But at the same time, you know, he will lay false emotions coming up soon. His guilt stops working altogether. He puts on a face. Everything starts leading on because of the notebook. And I wonder, right, because I don't remember correctly, if he loses the notebook, does he turn back into like that same old student? And if so, that just proves the case even more.
Start looking around. It makes you wonder if you'd be doing society a favor by getting rid of these people.
That line, though, you know, doing society a favor and getting rid of all these people, that is already like, it's going to his head, this amount of power, right? So in a theoretical situation, I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but this is simply because it's, for me, as, you know, someone that used to work, like, do a lot of social work, do a lot of psychology stuff with previous police departments, and I started off, I'll do a whole backstory as to how I got my whole psychology stuff, right? This makes 1,000 questions go off, right? So at that singular moment, right? So right now his ego is going through a quick increase, right, to the point where it's probably going to break his own glass ceiling and he's going to think he's invincible and everything like that. But let's imagine you're in a scenario where all of a sudden you find out that you're not the only one with this death note and there are others with it at the same time, right? Personally, I think if that were to have happened immediately, right? If Ryuk were to have come down immediately and been like, there's other notebooks out there, and you know what? You might die, and I might I'm going to take your life, when I feel the time is right. I think he would have had more control over the people that he kills and over his ego, which at the end, can sort of get the best of you.
Number one again. These are the highest scores you've had.
Yeah, I guess. I'm going to study in my room, so please don't interrupt.
For me, that's super
As you
sus.
wish. Oh, Light. Do you want anything at all, dear?
Okay, before we continue. So, something to point out here, right? People that are psychopathic and sociopathic can go ahead and become the perfect sort of role model in society if they wanted to. They can become the perfect boyfriend, the perfect lover, the perfect husband, the perfect dad, whatever it needs to be that scenario, right? These individuals can go ahead and put on that mask, right? And wearing that mask, while exhausting to most people, right, it sort of becomes a game to these individuals, at least from the individuals that I've had that have anti-personality disorders, antisocial personality disorders, ASPD, my bad. But it sort of becomes like easy to take off and put on that mask or whatever role needs to have that mask and so forth, right? And it can come at a point where if things don't go their way and that mask breaks, you truly see who they are as an individual on the inside, right? So always being like number one, getting the perfect grades, being like the perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect whatever, and all of a sudden having something go wrong and having that mask truly break would be interesting, just psycho inside of this. I love just watching this just for the psychological aspect of what's to come. Holy shit. I completely forgot about that. Damn. Alright, pause. I just finished one point, now I'm on to the other. Would you write, right, and I'm posing a lot of questions to you guys, would you write that many names in your first day of having the notebook? Personally, I wouldn't, right? I think the more names you write, the more suspicious you are as an individual in terms of, like, not only letting your, as I said, your ego rise, but you're also, like, if there are other people with notebooks, or if there are other people on this case, which will come soon enough, you have just led them all to your location, right? By killing everyone in a specific area or around, like, let's say, if I was living in California, right, and I chose everyone in the state of California, just different cities all around, right, you could easily pinpoint that, or even if it was in the United States, right, you could easily pinpoint that the person was living inside of the United States and start doing a backtrack to go ahead and find where the individual is, right? Which is what's soon to come, per se, but we'll leave it there. Would you guys kill that many people on your first day having a death note?
It will fall on me to write your name in my death note. Be warned, any human who's used a death note can neither go to heaven nor hell for eternity. That's all.
That is such a terrifying offer.
Now you have something to look forward to after you die.
And pause. That is such a terrifying offer. So, I in a way, I'm kind of glad that the show doesn't really go into it, because that would have been a whole, metaphysical interpretation as to what's happening, and sort of, or just a different interpretation of taking the court, like, show off course and so on and so forth, right? But, like, judging that there's a heaven and a hell, right? Being stuck in the middle, is that really such a bad thing if you're not going to hell, per se, right? Or is this, like, asking through a bunch of questions, like, do you get reincarnated? At this time, it's too late for Light. It is way too late. He already wrote way too many names. It's not like he's going to go either way. He's going to actually suffer throughout it. But, certain questions come into mind, aside from meeting a Shinigami, which, by the way, I'm not sort of taking the psychology of Ryuk, aside from he does what a lot of sort of therapists do, which is and I am putting myself and all therapists in blast, which is essentially like when you go to therapy, right? Uh, Granted, we do ask open-ended questions, but your narrative, the way that you spin your narrative, is your own, right? Um, and a lot of people, they'll. This is how you start finding flaws, and this is how you like. If you're into human psychology, if you're into like what the mind is or what the mind does, to study a little bit of psychology, right? It's perfect, especially like if you're going to go into like narrative therapy, right? So a person will start their story, they'll start telling, what's sort of wrong with them, their problems, and you just let them keep going, right? So he's sort of giving them a book, this ability to open up, do whatever he wants, to sort of open up the world in a weird possibility type manner, right? So if you start circling and going down this hole, right, in therapy, what you'll start finding out is like the root cause of the problem, sort of like the end point, right? And all the incongruencies in between, right? And for therapists, it's always fun to point out these incongruencies, because you're never supposed to be hands on in a therapist. As a life coach, that's different, and I'll explain that in a video to come. But in therapy, it's up to the client to go ahead and figure out like what these incongruencies are. You can point them out, like, hey, I'm seeing an issue here, but it's up to them to go out, like, to figure out self-betterment, self-actualization, and all of that, right? So it's interesting that Ryuk has this approach where he's like, at the end of it, like, I'm just gonna sit back, watch, and at the end of it, like, I will, when the time comes, I'll take your life, essentially, right? Granted, therapists won't take your life. I promise you, they're there to help you. And if you need any form of help, go to a therapist. 100% agree with that. It's just interesting that he has that narrative approach to this issue, or to not being bored. Oh God, here comes.
I want the world
Here
to know of my
comes the
existence, that there's someone out there
grandiose
passing
God
righteous
aspect
judgment
of
on the
himself.
wicked.
Wow.
Why even bother? What are you trying to achieve by passing judgment on them? I mean, why do
Wow.
you care?
Okay.
Because I've been bored too. I wasn't ready to believe it at first, but it's obvious now. There's something
All right,
about the
and
Death Note
pause.
itself.
Interesting how he sort of brings up this. He's building himself up, like even more now that Ryuk is like, I'm not gonna take your life. You do whatever you have to do. When the time comes, right? So he's like, I will become this god. I will do this. Very narcissistic thinking. I will actually tell you guys a story of Sociopath, for example, in a bit. But just to go ahead and at the end of like the reaction, I'll tell you guys a story about one of my clients that's a sociopath, or that was a sociopath, because person's no longer with me. But long story short, like, it's interesting how he keeps building himself up this way, right? Like, I will do this, I will do that, like, so on and so forth.
What if someone else had picked up this notebook? Is there anyone out there other than me who'd be willing to eliminate the vermin from the world? If I don't do it, at first I wrote the names of the worst criminals I could think of, like I was cleaning up the world one name
Yikes.
at a time, so that eventually
Yikes.
no one will ever do anything evil again.
Holy damn,
The
dude.
truly guilty ones who deserve to be punished for their crimes die of heart attacks. The people who are less guilty but who still make trouble for others will slowly be erased through disease and accidental death. Then, and only then, the world will start moving in the right direction.
Oof.
It'll be a new world,
Oof.
free of injustice and populated by people who I've judged to be honest, kind, and hardworking.
But if you did that, it would make you the only bad person left.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a hardworking
Yeah.
honor student who's considered to be one of Japan's best and brightest.
What a mask.
I will become the god of this new world.
Oh God.
Just as I thought, humans are so interesting.
Alright, and we're pausing there before the ending. Apologies in advance if you guys can hear my housemates, or, you know, sometimes sound travels through and there's really not a way to block it. But I will go ahead and say this, right? His thinking, right? It's a black and white thinking, and if you guys are interested in this, right, there is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called CBT, right? For those, this is a shortened form of it, which specifically goes into this, right? People that have black and white thinking, which is like, you know, bad, good, bad. There's no gray area, right? And that mentality, that sense of mind, that pretty much everything is pushing your schema, the way that you're reflecting life, into like one or two colors, one or two options. Having those two options at the end of the day, you know, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up causing more harm, not only to yourself, but to others around you, because you're not able to see the gray area between. Also, funny enough, right? Killers, right? And it's a cognitive error in his part, right? Killers, in his perspective, are bad, right? They must be eliminated. But because he's passing judgment down on these people and killing them, essentially, he doesn't need that judgment for himself because he's a good student, but he's the person that's killing all these other individuals. Also, who's to say that he's killing people correctly, right? A lot of people are put in jails and everything under wrong circumstances, and sometimes, like, you know, years later down the road, they find out that, like, they weren't even involved in the whole aspect of the crime or whatever happened, right? So he might be killing innocent people that he just deemed guilty because they were put to jail, right? Especially if, I'm not going to go into the whole racial, economic means or any of that, right? We'll keep that separate. But I will say, like, there's a whole lot of flaws in his way of thinking, and they become apparent when you break it down, right? So black and white thinking, absolutely. Ugh. But this is episode 1, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed some of the chat and some of the deep discussion. Let me tell you guys a story real quick, as I was mentioning. I had a sociopathic client one time, and sorry, I was looking down, taking off my shoes. I had a sociopathic client one time. It was a couple, actually. So the beauty about counseling is I can't go into names, can't go into any of that, but I can tell you a little bit of the story, right? So what ends up happening is essentially, like, I don't know, but there was a huge change that happened in his life, and this individual ended up putting on a mask every time that he was with anybody else that wasn't like himself at night, right? So when he was with like his significant other, he would put on the "I'm the perfect husband" mask. When he was like out with, like, you know, his kids, he would try and put on the "I'm a dad" mask, right? However, right, and this is where, like, him trying to wear all these different masks and detach himself. This is where the key is. When he was with his wife, he would be the perfect husband. He would, you know, or try to be the perfect husband, or try and be caring or whatever, right? But when he was out and about, he would wear the, you know, "I'm single" mask, or the, I don't know, anybody mask, like, "I'm just new here," or whatever that may be, right? And he was messing around with other individuals out there in the world. And when he got caught, eventually, there was no guilt. He felt no guilt whatsoever, no remorse, and even stated on various occasions that he had different feelings for even his kids, right? When he was with his kids, he loved them, you know, he cared about them. But the moment that his kids, sort of like object permanence in a way, were out of his, like eyesight, for example, just an extreme case, his emotions would drop, right? He wouldn't really care about them as much as, like, normal people would. Normal people would go ahead and, like, be attached to their kids and, like, care about them, put them above everyone else. And in a weird way, you know, you should always think about, well, not always, but, like, most families think about, like, hey, you know what, if we have kids, let's think about what we could do for our kids, not what our kids can do for us. And it was a very narcissistic, sociopathic thing. And it's just a way of thinking, that detachment, that disassociation that happens between emotions and events and everything is so well categorized that, you know, if you catch someone doing that, it's easy to go ahead and call them out and just be like, hey, you know what, I've noticed this happening. They might try and play it off, you know, they might try and put on another mask, but sometimes, you know, even in the daily life, it can happen to us too, where we put on a fake mask when, for example, we don't want to go out with friends or whatever, and we put on a happy mask or whatever. But just be aware of it. Be aware of disassociation. Be aware of putting on different masks, because it can get tiring and it can be really exhausting for your mental health. Anyway, guys, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for staying through. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You know, love yourself. Practice some self-care, guys. And most importantly, but, you know, not the least, please, you know, hit the like button. Subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if I should do any other anime, if I should do, like, any other episodes or anything like that, specifically about Death Note. Because, as I said, I've watched the series beforehand, so it's not that big of a shocker. But nonetheless, it is so interesting psychologically to go ahead and look at. Thank you so much. Love you guys. Bye.